Hi, this is Chris German, the Apartment Dealer. Welcome back to the Apartment Dealer Show. Do we have a treat for you today? Today I'll be bringing together the panel of speakers that normally speak at our live educational events that we host for landlords to do a webinar of sorts to address questions that either our personal clients have submitted or that were a carryover from our last live event that we just didn't get time to answer. And in these questions are a combination of questions with respect to what does inflation mean to apartments here in the near future, the economics overall of the state, the legalities around the eviction moratorium, raising rents, evicting tenants, doing substantial improvements in units. Interest rates are rising. What does that mean? What's happened in the world of lending? And the big R word, recession. What will that mean, if anything, to us landlords, to those of us who own multifamily properties? We tackle all these various topics within this conversation. I know that you'll find it informative. Be sure to like this video, subscribe to our channel if you haven't already done so. Share this video with every landlord you know, because it's important. Things are changing, the market is changing, things are in flux, and nothing will make a bigger difference than you having the right information to make educated decisions here in the coming days. With that, let's bring in our panel. Now with us today, we have Mr. Gil Figueroa. Gil Figueroa, for now nearly 4 decades, has been in the commercial lending space. And interestingly enough, the last few years has been able to predict the direction of interest rates and where they're headed. We appreciate him being part of our panel. We also have Mr. Bruce Norris. Bruce Norris not only is a hard money lender, educator, but he's an investor himself who's invested both in California and outside of California. And he brings that knowledge base with him of what's helped him, enabled him to make money in all markets, whether trending upwards or downwards. And he brings that insight here. Today we have Mr. Stephen Hall, who he and his family own one of the largest tax firms here in Southern California. He and his family work with individuals, investors like you and I, and especially individuals who are of high net worth. Well, what do they do to protect all that money? Steve brings that here to us today. We also have Mr. Steven Spear, who now for over 4 decades has been a litigator representing landlords like you and I in and outside the courtroom in the more difficult types of cases. And he brings that world of expertise, as well as being an investor of thousands, yes, I said thousands of rental units himself. So he has the practical day-to-day knowledge of being an investor. We also have with us Mr. Mike Brennan. Now, Mike Brennan is the eviction attorney extraordinaire, a lifesaver for us landlords here in Southern California. And he really has a pulse on all the intricacies as the eviction moratorium has changed, rent control changed, as each individual city and municipality has changed things over time, what is taking place, all under the aspiration to protect you and I as landlords. We're most appreciative to Mike and the rest of the gentlemen that are here with us today. Let's dig into our conversation.
First question here. The state of evictions come July 1st. Mike, if you can take this one.
Who knows? No, I'm kidding. I'm kind of being serious. We don't really know. I'm not hearing anything right now from the state indicating that they intend to extend 2179 at all. And in Los Angeles County, if they do not extend 2179, then the county's moratorium will kick in. And the question will be, will the county start its moratorium on July 1st, where it would have been had it been implemented on April 1st like it was supposed to be? Or will they pick up where it would have been? Will they start it over? In other words, the moratorium that was supposed to go into effect on April 1st, will that start July 1st? We don't know anything right now. Neither the county nor the state has really brought that up. If the county's moratorium goes into effect, let's just assume that it goes into effect where it would have been had it gone into effect on April 1st, then you still have all of your protections in place for the tenants on non-payment of rent, with the exception of the fact that it'll only apply to tenants who are at or below 80% AMI. And of course, how is a landlord going to know whether their tenants are at or below 80% AMI? I would encourage them to go back as far as they can and look for the applications of the tenants, figure out, what they claimed their income was at the time, and then run it against the current HUD numbers. So that's really all we can say. Outside of LA County, you're going to be back to normal. If the state's law expires, like I anticipate, then essentially you're going to go back to pre-COVID days, pre-COVID evictions, pre-COVID notices, no restrictions.
From the perspective of our law office, and Mike is the expert on these evictions. He is a go-to guy for this. From our perspective, even if moratoria are lifted, even if things return to what is called normal, things are going to be far from normal for a long time because of the enormous backlog of calls. If anybody remembers Lucy and Ethel and the chocolate conveyor belt, that's what it looked like under normal conditions prior to COVID. Now, the room is just stacked to the ceiling with chocolates. The cases are backed up. The normal load, they're backed up with what the load would have been for the last 2.5 years. And they are backed up with the increase of all the people who need to be evicted as a result of non-payment of rent or other infractions. So even with the moratoriums lifted, we're going to see a long time before things get back to anything like normal. Mike, do you agree with that?
I do, but I have a caveat to that. Any case that was brought on non-payment of rent, even in LA County, any case brought on non-payment of rent that occurred after March 31st, believe it or not, those cases are actually progressing pretty smoothly because there are no protections in place for the tenants. The cases that are really, you are correct, there is a backlog. And the cases that are creating the backlog are the evictions that were filed for non-payment of rent prior to March 31st, because those are all of the ones where the state has not even assigned a worker to some of those applications for the rental assistance funds yet. And until they do, and until the tenant's application is either approved or denied, they're in a limbo. And while they're in that limbo, the court's just continuing the case for some form of a determination. And while they do that, it's backlogging everything else. But like I said, the cases that are brought on non-payment of rent after March 31st, thankfully, those are moving pretty smoothly. And again, outside of LA County, things are moving pretty well.
I'll add to this the complication that the ACLU has taken the position that criminal defendants are being denied a speedy trial. So those cases are being prioritized. Family law court says that children in child custody and visitation cases are priority. So those are prioritized. Then come unlawful detainers. If you just have a regular civil lawsuit, you're in line.
Yeah, that's very accurate.
If the LA County moratorium does come into effect, when is it set to expire per what's written now?
July of 2023 on the non-payment of rent. So they did this really crafty thing with the language on their preamble. They say, oh, these protections are extended through December 31st of 2022. But if you read the actual motion that was passed, the non-payment of rent protections go all the way through July 30th of 2023. Yeah. So we're looking at a year, unless you can demonstrate that your tenant makes 81% of AMI or better, you're looking at another year that landlords are not going to be able to evict for non-payment of rent in LA County. And remember, LA County, that moratorium covers all 88 cities in LA County. So the impact is going to be large.
What impact will inflation have in the next 12 months for vacancies and per door selling prices? Bruce, I know this may not be apartment specific, but what do you think inflation will mean to real estate values over the next year?
Because of the timing of it, it's not going to be pleasant. I'll give you just a quick example of the history of it, okay? 74 to 80, we had inflation for 7 years. We had prices triple while interest rates doubled. That's actually what happened. The reason that was possible was we started out with 45% affordability in 74. We worked our way down to 17. 17 is the lowest number California has in affordability, so that's the breaking point. We've had it in 80, 89, 2006, and 2021. So we are there. So what happens after that is that you start to lose. First of all, you only get there by euphoria. That's how you get to 17% affordability. You just got to have one. Now that you have a math problem, you have a math problem too. You're already at 17% affordability and your interest rates are at 5. So if you have future rate hikes, it doesn't help the mood of the buyer, but it also hurts the math of their prospects of getting a yes answer. So the long and short of it is that for every interest rate hike, 1%, you lose about 9% buying power. That's how it works.
Put another way, the solution to higher prices is higher prices. It's a dynamic that will correct itself for the reasons you just said, Bruce.
What's also interesting though is, okay, where are you going to get, let's say you need a glut of inventory to have price damage. How many people with a 2 and 3% mortgage are going to say, well, I'm going to list my house and sign up for a 6? So you're going to have a ton of inventory not show up. You're going to have a ton of inventory never get foreclosed on because the equity position is so great that even if those people lose their job, if it goes to a trustee sale, which is very unlikely, it'll get bought by an investor and not become an REO. So you've got some real safeguards in here, but the actual math is California is at a breaking point of the payment to earnings, and it got there at the peak of the mood when it always does. And now, just so you know, you don't spend a lot of time at 17% affordability. You've landed there 4 times for less than a year over a 40-year period.
Well, and one of the things that this will do to impact multifamily housing apartments is that when you do your exit surveys for why you are losing tenants, the answer isn't going to be, I'm buying a house. The answer that in an economy where people can't afford to buy the house comes up frequently will be simply absent. You won't lose tenants to that. Turnover should be lower as a consequence.
So Bruce, I have a question for you. So you mentioned in statistics, you mentioned 5% reduction for every 1% of increase in interest rate. Is that 5% a reduction of
It's not 9%. If you were able to afford this payment when an interest rate goes up 1%, you have about a 9% price hit to get to the same payment.
Got it. Interesting. So this week with the Fed interest rates going up, they're announcing a 0.75% increase this coming week. So it sounds like basically we'll start seeing shocks in the system coming up.
Okay, but again, don't assume that the price is going to decline because you may have a seller that says, I'm not going to put mine up for sale. I'm going to stay. You're not going to have lenders foreclose overnight. And you also don't have builders that are going to say, oh my gosh, we can't sell our existing homes and we're going to have an auction that wipes out everybody that just bought. I actually outlined a report today, and I hadn't intended to do another one, but I might. And the title is Uncharted Territory because we have never been here.
Yeah.
Well, and we're coming out of a period of extraordinarily low sales volume, low market velocity. And it sounds, Bruce, what you're saying is we may be going into a period where we have even lower market velocity.
Yeah, after 17% affordability, 4 charts turn negative. Your inventory goes up, your sales go down, your trustee sales go up, your unemployment goes up. Now, you don't always have price damage, but you've had 3 examples of it. One, you have a flat market. That was 81 and 82, oddly enough. In the 90s, you had a gradual decline of 10% over 6 years. And then you had a price crash in 2009. What made the difference? The dominant comp in the 09 era was the REO that sold for such a cheap price that the appraiser had no choice but to appraise a house for less than the lot cost and a permit in Moreno Valley.
So your comments here are primarily directed at single family residences, condominiums, and townhouses.
Absolutely.
What do you think the effect is on apartments?
You know, that's why you guys are there and I'm not on that side, but you're right. It seems like if you were going to migrate, because you got to buy a house and you were excited about doing that, that mood has changed. And if you can't get a yes answer from a lender, you're very likely to stay a tenant. That makes perfect sense.
Fortunately, we have the apartment dealer here, Chris German. What will the effect of this be on the apartment market?
Well, so 2 comments here, because I like to be very practical about these things. When you look at single family homes, About 1 in 5 homes just took a price reduction over the last couple of weeks. The inventory across the nation. But even simpler than that, I've noticed driving around various neighborhoods, because obviously as I'm going from one building to another that we're selling for clients or viewing and what have you, there's more and more for sale signs on homes, and they're staying up longer, at least here with the communities that I'm looking at. So it's very practical that if these sellers need to sell, these homeowners need to sell, well, then they're going to have to reduce the price. And all you need is a couple comps in the wrong way, and that starts changing the market direction in terms of values of homes. It would just have to, because these buyers are losing incredible buying power. Not only are they fighting the increase in interest rates, but here today, the recording of the video, there's places in California where gas is $7 a gallon. So they're competing both of these things. And so the prices have to come down in order for these people to become homeowners. Now, with respect to apartments, for every 1% that you increase interest rates, generally speaking, and Gail can speak to this too, cash flow goes down by about 15%. So the question will be, as of today, as of the recording of this video, values are about the same. Interest rates have gone up at least a point, if not more, over the last 4 or 6 weeks. But things are about the same. But now we're going to test the buyer pool. Are they willing to essentially buy something at a 4% cap rate, yet the interest rate is 4.5, meaning they're losing money on the money borrowed. And that's something that's going to be tested. Now, the other part of that question that Deepan asked was vacancies. What will it do to vacancies? As of the recording of this, I actually just leased 2 apartments that I own. And so I manage my own supply. And you'd be surprised because of the demand factor that Spear often talks to. I had at both places, and I always ask probably about 10 to 15% above market because of the quality of our units. I still had a line of people out the door for 2 hours during this showing, the way that I coordinate things at both units. One was a 2-bedroom, one was a 1-bedroom. And I'm quite astonished that we actually have filled both. I filled them both with one showing. Very strong tenants. And again, people can view the videos on our channel to see, well, how do you do all that? How do you find the right tenant and get the high rental rate? But as of right now, the tenants seem to be still okay with these extraordinary rental rates that we've had over the last few years. Last year was the highest year ever recorded for rental increases. Second to that is supposed to be this year. This is supposed to be the second biggest gain that we'll see in rental rates behind last year. And so we'll see. We'll see again. Inflation. I think that's the kicker here for the average tenant. How much more inflation will we see? Will gas prices go to $8 and $9, as many are predicting here, at least locally and here in California? What's going to happen when they go to the grocery stores? And as we dig in more and more into the discretionary income, do they then tenants have been spending more than 50% of their discretionary income on rental. Are they going to say, well, I'll spend 60, 65? In other words, where's the breaking point? And I think that's going to be tested here shortly.
Can I just intersect one thing? That raise in rents also gives credence to saying, you know what, I will buy if I can qualify at 5 or 6% loan, because my rent is so close to my payment because it got raised so much that it lends credence to saying, okay, I'll still be a buyer if I can get a lender to say yes.
So if that's the case, then we're going to see some people, if they can qualify, becoming homeowners rather than tenants. Gil, as a loan professional, do you think they'll qualify, or are we going to see qualification for a loan being one of the bigger blocks?
Nothing's changed as far as the metrics are concerned. They still have a debt to income ratio qualification. Now, the market has evolved where we have now a brand new stated income type product, a bank statement product, and a no DCR product out there from these secondary markets that are going to basically, I'd say, lead fire to these times, so to speak. I do see a large percentage of people not qualifying or not being able to buy, and hence will be more renters. I think inflation is a middle class killer, and that's what's coming. And we're going to have 6-figure clients in our C markets that we've never seen before. And I'm already seeing that from some of my tenants and some of my investors are seeing that as well. The key question moving forward is investors, will they keep buying at an inverse cap rate, which we're seeing already happening? And the question is, what do they fear more? The loss of asset, the fear of inflation, or just getting a bad performing asset? I think they fear inflation more.
Chris, when you look at this, at these conditions, and as Gil is describing, with the question of whether you might lose tenants to home purchase, and with everything else in mind, would you encourage landlords right now to be aggressive about raising rents as much as they can, or would you suggest that landlords tap the brakes?
So to Gil's comment on the quality of tenant is increasing. Now, this assumes you have a good quality of an asset to offer. So again, going back to substantial improvement and, the dead horse that I've been beating with people ever since the passage of rent control to increase the quality of their units. If you have the right quality of apartment to offer for rent, you'd be surprised the nurses and other professionals that are going to apply because they cannot afford a home and everything else. And they're not maybe excited about being a renter. So if they're going to be a renter, they want to rent a location where they can call this home, have pride to bring family and friends over. This is what we find day in, day out. And they will pay above market rents. Now, again, I'm not an economist, so who knows how much inflation, we're going to see going forward. But that's where we are right now, is that if you have a good quality asset, then you have the chance to get a better quality tenant than ever before.
Chris, you talk about beating that dead horse. That horse is going to decompose before some landlords decide that it's time to improve their property. But if you're a proper landlord and you're providing a clean, safe space that's well maintained, and you respond to your residents like the customers that they actually are, Chris is absolutely right. That's the best way to run a building.
Chris, what is your rent to income ratio that you're running on your buildings?
So typically we're at about 2.5.
Okay. And what are you charging for security deposits?
Depends on the credit. So now keep in mind, my rental rates are high. So the security deposit, even if it's 1 month, is pretty significant. Right. Typically it's 1 month. If the credit is questionable, then it's going to be 2 months. Now, here's the thing, I spent a lot of time talking about renting to millennials, attracting millennials in the units. Millennials have a lot of college debt that's on their transcript. And a lot of times that impairs their credit score. So I would tell landlords, rather than being fixated on it's a 720 or a 690 or what have you, take a look at, here's the bottom line. Are they paying their obligations? When you add up the totals of those obligations and then factor in just common numbers for car insurance, food, utilities, and what have you, put some money for some nightlife, can they afford the place? I've rented to people with credit scores of 675, and they're the greatest tenants who mind their own business. And I rented to others, listening to wrong advice from some people who had 740. There can be sometimes a more thorn in your side of anything else. So, I started out, my wife and I being a renter. I know Bruce has, the same story. And so we give these tenants a place that I would want to rent, a place that I would want to call home. But it also is business. So we also charge the right rate for the quality that we're offering them.
So assuming you have a proper space and you're renting a high quality product, would you encourage landlords to push hard on rent or tap the brake?
Rent control has given you no choice but to raise rents. How many clients have you spoken to that have said this line? Well, now that they've passed rent control, I really have to raise my rents. It's done the exact opposite. And one other level to that is the fact that now investors like myself, like Deepin, like many of our clients, are vacating tenants. So because the rental rates are so low, we're using the substantial improvement clause to take back the units. So then we can double and triple the rents, because the buildings we're buying, those landlords fell so far behind on the rents. So what has rent control done in the end? It's actually displaced tenants and it's increased the rental rates. Good job to all the politicians.
Every time that the politicians decide that they're going to do something good, they run into the law they can't stop, and that is the law of unintended consequences. They have no understanding of how business people think and really how the market operates when they pass stringent rent control rules.
Gil, interest rates, where are we headed from here?
Chris, I sent you a chart that we'll put up. And on our April 27th meeting, I mentioned that rates were going to have a slight dip. They did exactly that. They dropped 18%. We were able to lock some people as low as 3.7 at that time. We reached a low of 262 on the treasuries, and our high on April 27th was 318. Now we're in the fifth wave, the final wave, which is going to be a strong wave up. I'm expecting treasuries to go to at least 3.7. If we crack 3.7, we have to hold on, and we might see 4.3.
So in layman's terms, right? So they're saying, okay, so just tell me, I'm about to refi, I'm about to purchase. Would you say the average rate today is 4.5%? Would you agree with that number?
For a good client in a good building, yes. For a
And you
C
think
property,
we're headed to, so if 4.5 is the floor, where are we headed from here?
well, I mean, if banks have a 1 or 1.5% yield from treasuries, we're headed to, potentially at 3.7, we're headed for 5.2, and at 4.3, we're headed for, close to 6.
Wow.
Yeah.
Gil, did I hear you say that you have a stated income product right now?
We do. There's stated income products now for 1 to 4 units and for multifamily as well. Outside of stated income, there's something new out there, a product that we've been lending on, and that's a no DCR program where they're using bank statements for the self-employed. So what they're doing is they're taking just gross receipts of the self-employed to qualify, taking a factor of expenses of about 25 to 35%. And backing into a debt service that, does qualify. So this is the new stated income for single family and for some multifamily product that's evolved in the last year.
Now, Bruce, in the hard money world, have you adjusted your rates at the Norris Group? Are you planning on adjusting rates for the fix and flip loans?
We haven't yet. I'm sure we probably will. I found it interesting, Gil, that your loan rate for the apartments is less than for Fannie Mae. Right now, Fannie Mae loan is about 6 for residents.
Yeah. So what you have to look at is most of the apartments will use a cost of funds rate internally. So if their cost of funds is based on a 2-year spread, which is probably 2 3/4, and they have a 1.5 margin, that's where we get that 4.25, 4.5. Now, also keep in mind and note that the rate I'm quoting is based on a 5-year fix, not a 30-year fix. Which you're using a 30-year fix for single family.
All right, thanks.
Switching gears here, is there any benefit to holding your real estate in an LLC, whether legal or financial, as opposed to a family trust?